The chain-link fence rattled in the cold November wind as Mary Davidson adjusted her security uniform and checked her watch. 11:47 p.m. Another long night ahead at Fort Braxton's most forgotten post, Parking Lot C, where military families parked their personal vehicles, and absolutely nothing interesting ever happened. At least, that's what everyone thought. But before we dive into this incredible declassified story, tell us in the comments where you're watching from today. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button because what you're about to hear is a true account that remained classified for 15 years, involving the most underestimated security guard in military history, and the pattern that no one else could see. This is the story of how Mary Davidson, assigned to the worst shift at the most boring post on base, became the key to unraveling America's most dangerous terrorist cell. Mary had always been different. While other kids played video games, she solved puzzles. While her high school classmates partied, she studied patterns in everything from traffic flows to bird migration routes. Her father, a retired police detective, noticed her unusual gift early. "Mary's got something special," Detective Robert Davidson would tell his colleagues. "She sees things other people miss, patterns, connections, details that don't fit. But seeing patterns and getting people to take you seriously were two very different things." After high school, Mary had applied to join the FBI's behavioral analysis program. Her test scores were exceptional, her psychological profile perfect, her analytical skills off the charts. But the interview panel saw a 22-year-old woman from small-town Ohio with no college degree and no real-world experience. "Miss Davidson," Agent Sarah Mitchell had said, barely looking up from Mary's file, "this program requires agents who can handle high-pressure situations and make life-or-death decisions. Perhaps you should consider starting with local law enforcement or security work to gain some experience." Mary walked out of that interview with her jaw set and her mind made up. If they wanted experience, she'd get experience. That's how she ended up at Fort Braxton, taking the security job that no one else wanted. Graveyard shift, parking lot duty, minimum interaction with actual military personnel. The recruitment officer, Sergeant Jake Morrison, had been blunt about the position's prospects. "Look, Davidson, this isn't glamorous work. You'll be walking empty lots, checking vehicle passes, and watching security monitors for 8 hours. Most people last about 3 months before requesting a transfer." "I'm not most people," Mary had replied quietly. Morrison had laughed. "That's what they all say." For the first 6 months, it seemed like Morrison might be right. Parking Lot C was exactly as advertised, boring, isolated, and seemingly pointless. Mary walked her rounds, checked vehicles, and maintained security logs that no one ever read. But while everyone else saw a meaningless routine, Mary saw something different. She saw patterns. It started small. License plates that appeared more frequently than statistical probability suggested. Vehicles that were registered to addresses that didn't exist. Cars that arrived and departed at precisely timed intervals. Most people would dismiss these observations as coincidence or clerical errors. Mary began keeping her own logs. In a small notebook that she carried during rounds, she recorded every detail that seemed unusual. License plate numbers, arrival and departure times, vehicle descriptions, and passenger behaviors. After 3 months of meticulous documentation, a picture began to emerge. 17 different vehicles, all registered to fake addresses, all following patterns that suggested coordination rather than coincidence. Mary's breakthrough came on a cold Tuesday night in February. She was reviewing her notes when she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The 17 vehicles weren't just following patterns, they were conducting surveillance. Each car would arrive at specific times that corresponded with shift changes of key military personnel. The passengers would position themselves to observe specific buildings on base. They would photograph license plates of vehicles belonging to high-ranking officers, and they were mapping the base's security rotations with surgical precision. This wasn't random criminal activity. This was sophisticated intelligence gathering. Mary faced a dilemma. She had uncovered what appeared to be a major security threat, but she was just a parking lot guard. Who would believe her? Who would even listen? She decided to start with her immediate supervisor, Sergeant First Class Jennifer Torres, who managed security operations for the civilian areas of the base. "Torres," Mary said during their weekly check-in, "I need to show you something." Mary spread her notebook across Torres's desk, explaining the patterns she'd identified, the fake registrations, and the coordinated timing of the surveillance activities. She spoke for 20 minutes, outlining connections that painted a picture of organized intelligence gathering. Torres listened politely, occasionally nodding, but her expression grew increasingly skeptical. "Davidson," Torres said when Mary finished, "I appreciate your enthusiasm. But don't you think you might be seeing patterns where none exist? These are probably just coincidences, military families coming and going, maybe some clerical errors in the registration database." Mary felt the familiar sting of dismissal. "Sergeant, with respect, 17 vehicles with fake addresses appearing at coordinated times isn't coincidence. This is organized surveillance." Torres leaned back in her chair. "Look, Mary, I know the night shift can be isolating. Sometimes people start seeing things that aren't there. Why don't you take a few days off, clear your head?" Mary realized she was on her own. Instead of backing down, Mary decided to gather more evidence. She began photographing the suspicious vehicles, documenting their activities with timestamps and detailed observations. She used her off-duty time to research the fake addresses, tracing them through public records and discovering a web of shell companies and false identities. What she found terrified her. The surveillance operation was more sophisticated than she'd initially realized. The 17 vehicles were just the tip of the iceberg. Behind the fake registrations were dummy corporations connected to foreign accounts. The passengers weren't random criminals. They were trained operatives conducting systematic intelligence gathering on one of America's most sensitive military installations. Mary's investigation revealed that the surveillance team had been mapping base security for months, identifying vulnerabilities, cataloging personnel movements, and preparing detailed intelligence packages. But for what purpose? The answer came during a routine patrol on March 15th. Mary was checking vehicles in the far corner of parking lot C when she noticed something different about one of the surveillance cars. Instead of conducting their usual observation activities, the occupants were having what appeared to be an urgent meeting. Through her binoculars, she could see papers being exchanged, phones being used, and obvious agitation among the group. That's when she saw it. A brief glimpse of what looked like architectural plans being reviewed by the passengers. Base blueprints. Mary realized that the months of surveillance had been preparation for something bigger. These weren't just intelligence gatherers, they were advanced scouts for an operation. And whatever they were planning, it was happening soon. She made a decision that would change everything. Instead of going through official channels again, Mary decided to take her evidence directly to the FBI. She had documented everything meticulously, photographed the suspicious activities, and traced the connections between the fake identities and foreign accounts. If local security wouldn't listen, maybe federal agents would. But Mary made one crucial error. She didn't realize that the surveillance operation had been monitoring base communications, including security reports and personnel activities. They knew she was watching them. On March 18th, Mary arrived for her shift to find her usual patrol area significantly changed. The 17 suspicious vehicles were gone. Parking lot C was eerily empty, cleaned of any evidence that might support her months of investigation. It looked like the surveillance operation had simply vanished. Over the next hour, Thompson explained the scope of what Mary's investigation had uncovered. The surveillance operation she'd identified had led to the discovery of terrorist cells in 12 states. The evidence she'd gathered had enabled federal agents to trace funding sources, identify foreign contacts, and prevent attacks that could have killed thousands of Americans. Davidson, Thompson continued, you've just single-handedly disrupted the biggest terrorist operation in American history. The question is, what do we do with you now? One of the federal agents, who introduced himself as Director Michael Hayes from the FBI's counterterrorism division, leaned forward. Miss Davidson, do you remember your application to the FBI's behavioral analysis program 3 years ago? Mary nodded, expecting another rejection. Agent Mitchell, who interviewed you, noted in her report that you had exceptional analytical skills but lacked real-world experience. Hayes smiled. I think we can safely say that's no longer an issue. What followed was an offer that Mary had dreamed about for years, a position with the FBI's elite terrorism analysis unit, working with the most sophisticated intelligence-gathering operations in the world, using her pattern recognition abilities to identify threats before they materialized. But Hayes had one more surprise. Davidson, there's something else you should know. The surveillance operation you uncovered, it had been active for 8 months. FBI, CIA, NSA, and military intelligence had all missed it. Thousands of trained professionals looked at the same information you had access to, and none of them saw the pattern. Hayes paused. You were just a security guard walking parking lots, but you identified a threat that our best analysts missed. That's not luck. That's a gift. 6 months later, Special Agent Mary Davidson reported to the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit at Quantico. Her first assignment was training other agents to recognize the subtle patterns that indicate organized surveillance operations. The parking lot at Fort Braxton was renamed Davidson Plaza in honor of the security guard who proved that the most important intelligence often comes from the most unexpected sources. Today, Mary leads one of the FBI's most successful counterterrorism teams. She's prevented dozens of attacks, identified hundreds of threats, and trained thousands of agents to see what others miss. But she still keeps a small notebook where she records unusual patterns, just like she did during those long nights in parking lot C. The lesson Mary learned during those months of patient observation has become fundamental to modern security doctrine. The most dangerous threats are often hiding in plain sight, and the most valuable intelligence comes from people who pay attention to details that everyone else ignores. When asked about her success, Mary's response is characteristically modest. I just watch for things that don't fit. Most people see what they expect to see. I see what's actually there. Her office at FBI headquarters displays a single reminder of her time at Fort Braxton, a parking pass from Lot C, and a handwritten note that reads, "Never underestimate the power of paying attention." Mary Davidson proved that heroism doesn't require special forces training or advanced degrees. Sometimes it just requires the patience to notice what others miss and the courage to act when action is needed. In the world of intelligence gathering, where sophisticated technology and elaborate operations get the headlines, Mary's story reminds us that the most important discoveries often come from the most ordinary people doing extraordinary attention to detail. Don't forget to subscribe to Beneath Word Stories for more incredible tales of hidden heroes and the quiet vigilance that keeps our world safe. What do you think about Mary's persistence in the face of dismissal? Have you ever noticed patterns that others missed? Let us know in the comments below and tell us where you're watching from today.